Hello, welcome to Business and Life Advice with Ataande Advisors. My name is Achumboro Ataande. I'm the CEO of Ataande Advisors, and I will be the one who will answer your questions. Here, you can ask anything business,
How would you recommend I develop these mini experts?
leadership,
What is the best way to be a female CEO?
self-development.
Where do you kind of like go to gain those experiences or to find your ideas?
I mean, it's something that I really pride myself in being able to kind of pace myself to do while I'm working on the business and just have other roles.
I love that we came full circle back to the educational styles. That's amazing.
You know your business best, you know your needs best. What is your first question you'd like to ask? Today, I'm going to be commenting on a few different business-related videos. The first one's about how Richard Branson created 400 companies by hiring the number 2 guy at the number 1 company. Also, a video about whether delegation is required for scale and advice for entrepreneurs on the long haul of business. There'll be many other videos throughout this, but those are some of the key ones to look at. I would say stay till the last video because I share a case study that will be helpful in motivating you in order to continue going on when things don't look great in your business. This is Life and Business with Ataande Advisors, here where we talk about solutions to problems facing entrepreneurs, leaders, and people serious about self-development. My name is Achumboro Ataande. I'm a 4-time entrepreneur, attorney, adjunct professor, and angel investor. Let's jump right into the first video regarding Richard Branson hiring the number 2 guy at the number 1 company.
Top talent. I'm talking to him. I said, how do you build these billion-dollar companies? He goes, I just hired the number 2 at the number 1 company and asked them if they want to start a company together. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, we just started Virgin Voyages, and the guy he hired was the COO at Carnival Cruise. I don't know anything about cruise ships, but he sure does. He's got 27 years in the industry, and now he's my partner in Virgin Voyages. And we just signed 2 deals for 2 $1.3 billion ships, and I'm pretty sure he knows how to run it. I'm there if he needs me to do something. That's another level.
So I completely agree. That is another level. And let's just break down a few things. So usually the number 2 guy at the number 1 company is great at execution. So the CEO may be somebody who's great at sales, marketing, has a phenomenal vision, is very charismatic. And then the number 2 guy may be great at executing, getting things done, pulling the teams, gathering resources, deploying them, etc. So that's what's going on in this dynamic. So if you're bringing in somebody who's great at execution and you match that with Richard Branson, who's a vision guy, right? Vision and charisma. He's phenomenal at this. This makes so much sense. So understanding these underpinnings is foundational to knowing what goes on. Now, even more than this, for you or us out there, even if you're not the number 1 company, you kind of want to know how to keep your number 2 guy if this opportunity is out there for them. Let's say somebody else wants to go get your number 2 guy. That can possibly cripple your business. How do you keep them? One is you have a vision/opportunity for them. Have you demonstrated not just a vision for the company, but a vision for this person? So for example, Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. I can't say that this was a vision for him, but Tim Cook, eventually he's now the CEO of Apple, and the stock has done phenomenal under him. So was that communicated between Steve and Tim that this would be an option for him to come and take over the company? And if you're the number 2, why leave to start something new if you can just eventually take over the number 1 company? So that's a great way to keep people and make sure other people can't out-recruit you or take away your key talent. Another thing, challenges. Are you giving them challenges that make them feel useful, that make them feel alive, that make them know that they're integral to the business? Challenges that help them continue to grow. Are you giving them job tasks, duties, responsibilities that's feeding them? This number 2 guy is probably somebody who's very driven, probably was number 1 in many other spheres of their life. So they want to be involved in the planning. They want to be involved in the execution. They want to be working on big problems. They want to be working on things that move the needle. Are you giving them those opportunities? That's really important, right? Something that I touched on before in some other videos, but are you rewarding them in ways that feels good to them? Is it verbal praise? Are they somebody who needs praise? Is it monetary compensation? Is it giving them flexible time? Are you finding ways to celebrate them/reward them in ways that feels good to them? And then the final thing I'll say is there's also legal and other remedies, right? So do you have a non-compete? And they do have things that limit their ability to leave and go work at a competitor. How do you have them locked in? Stock incentives, etc. So these are things to think about. And this was a great video. So next, let's jump to our next video.
Because if you follow the flow of the income statement and you see who gets paid first, if you just go through the income, first the suppliers, then you pay your staff, then you pay the government taxes, then you pay the bank interest, then you pay yourself dividends. So the entrepreneur in the business gets paid last. But unless we go through an education system that teaches us these things, what happens is we breed entrepreneurs, you're seeing it now, who think entrepreneurship is instant money. Do you see? Whereas any person who's a real entrepreneur, and I'm not, with respect, I'm not talking about people who pose as entrepreneurs, I'm talking real entrepreneurs, will tell you that it takes a long time and it's very hard. So that's why you need an education for people who want to be an entrepreneur.
Yes, we get paid last. Right? We get paid last. The CEO, the owner, investors, we get paid last. And that's something to know if you're going to go in. It's not, hey, you're going to start and, oh, you're going to see $1 million. We're getting paid like everybody's being paid before us. So that's something to know, getting involved. Now, getting paid last, I'm going to elaborate. That sometimes means I myself don't get paid for 2 months. Right? There's times where we're having a red month or whatever. We're investing more, something that we mishandled our cash flow. Maybe we went out and had a hire that didn't work, or maybe we bought an asset, etc. So we're investing more, and I'm having a red month and the revenue is not matching the expenses. And that means I'm not getting paid for 1, 2, 3 months, but I still have to make payroll. I still have to pay the suppliers. And that's something that's going to be on you if you become an entrepreneur. This is the real things that entrepreneurs. I also have another business where I don't get paid for sometimes for 9, 10 months, right? I get paid a year later. So that's something to know when you're going into entrepreneurship. These pay cycles are longer because my other business in government contracting on the city and state level. So that's different than federal level. You get paid much faster, but those are some things to know, right? If you're going into, hey, this is the real things. And if in that, let's say you're taking out a loan, when you finally get paid, you're not keeping as much as you would otherwise. So these are things to think about, right? Then you have to decide when you finally do get paid, we have to decide whether we're going to pay ourselves or put more money into the business to make it grow faster. And so it takes a long time, right? It takes a long time usually to have a successful business where you can really enjoy the fruits of your labor. And that's something that we all need to know if you're going in or you're trying to scale and you're not hearing this. This is what happens. But it is rewarding. It is rewarding when it works. Now, there's some months where it looks phenomenal and makes up for not getting paid for two months, 3 months, or makes up for not getting paid for the year. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. But it's not just financial rewards. There's also rewards from the standpoint of the growing we have to do, right? To build something and create value. How much long it takes to build a team, right? The person you become. Also seeing the people grow under you. So you're seeing people being able to take out their families, people being able to go on vacation, people being able to treat themselves. And you're seeing that economic value you're able to create and the things you're able to build and how it's affecting different families. And that's something that's really beautiful. It keeps you going even when the revenue doesn't match the expenses. So it's beautiful in terms of the person you have to become. It's beautiful in many ways in terms of the things you put out and how you help people grow and how you help people be able to take care of themselves. But there is a cost. There's a real cost to that. And so we have to be dedicated, and this is something to know. All right, we'll jump into the next video.
Did that is every message coming into his life went through a person named Helen. And Helen was his executive assistant. They would have breakfast, and for 90 minutes, she would bring to him only the things she didn't know how to handle, and they would talk about it. Where you're at today, if you want to get to 10 million, you're at 1 million, it requires a completely different paradigm shift in how you think about your time. When I was younger, I had all the time in the world, so guess what? I didn't value it. When people get into their 40s and 50s, all of a sudden it becomes really valuable and they start looking at these opportunities to buy it back.
This is spot on, right? This is spot on. The getting executive assistant and training that person can really open up your opportunities. And delegation is required for scale. So in order to delegate, this got really into so the video is about Richard Branson. And in order to delegate, you have to communicate, right? You have to communicate with the people you're delegating to. Now, this communication can be one-on-one meetings, phone calls, etc., or via written communication, right? Emails, texts, hey, this is what training and SOPs, right? So you can create a document that tells people, hey, this is what you do in this scenario and give guidance that way. So there's many ways to communicate, but that's something that's key for making delegating delegation work. And as the reason why this is so important, right? As you scale, more opportunity and responsibility comes along. Even the best intentioned people or the most disciplined people will end up missing things because there's only so much a human can carry. So there's only so much you can do. So if you're used to running 10 projects, you can do it by, if you get 1,000, things are going to fall through the crack no matter how disciplined you are if you're doing it by yourself. But if you're able to have a team around that's taking care of it, that allows you to make sure things don't fall in between the cracks. And as you scale, you're not losing your brand promise, right? You're keeping your promise to your clients. Now, I would say also with that is automation/systems. So it's not just about delegating. It's also about creating automation/systems that make sure things get done well. All right, let's jump into the next video.
Always sets their goals like, I'm going to make $100,000. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. No, you're not. You're only going to do it if you're willing to pay the price. Every single goal you have has a price that is required. It is an entry fee at the door of success. And the question is really, what are you going to give up to get it? So when I say I want to make $100,000, I'll say, I'm not going to watch Netflix and I'm not going to eat Chipotle burritos until I hit $100,000. Whatever you think needs to be given up is the price of admission for the thing you want more than anything else.
This is so powerful, right? This is so powerful. We have to give up something to hit our goals, right? And being willing to do that over and pay the price over and over again is usually what's going to determine whether we hit our goals or we don't. So one of the things that I realized is my sacrifice for me to hit the next levels. I can no longer do trips that are not strictly business. Meaning that for me, a trip I love traveling. I'm actually on my 40th country right now. I'm shooting for my 40th country. So I love traveling, but I realized that it is getting in the way of me reaching my next level. The way I used to be able to manage it with my business, and I thought now that I have more people, it's actually easier. It's gotten a lot harder to manage it. And I realized for me to take the next step, I have to stop traveling. If it's not at least 90% for business, for a period of time, right? So that's my thing. Whatever you have to realize, usually the thing is staring you in the face. It's the thing that's keeping you from going forward. It's the price you really don't want to pay. Is it getting up early? Is it waking up at 5 a.m.? Is it not going out to a party? Is it canceling your Netflix subscription, right? So what is the price that you have to pay? What is the sacrifice you have to make to hit the next level? We all have that. And the question is, that door is going to stay closed, or we're not going to be able to fit through that door until we do make the sacrifice. So that's something I'll say. One more thing, it's also about the systems that you set up to make sure you keep making the sacrifice, right? And if possible, making it easier, more automatic for you to sacrifice. So there's something called friction, right? You can make it easier or harder to do a habit by creating friction, which makes it harder to do something, or reducing friction, which makes it easier to do something. And this is detailed in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He also has a great quote, which is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So this is something, I think you got it, and I wish you the best. Next video.
Nah, you probably wouldn't succeed if you were white.
Let's be real. Because the moment you start saying you're not succeeding because of something external, that's the moment you've lost the internal battle. Look, are there discrepancies? Are there people who have biases and would rather work with one race or one person? Or there are some people that only want to work with people that are over 6 feet, okay? That's not what you should be focused on. You should be focused on how to be the best version of you and how you can push forward and go and add value to the people that do want to work with you. There's somebody that does want to work with someone who's black, who's white, who's short, who's tall. There's somebody that doesn't. It's your job to go find them. Stop complaining. Stop sitting around thinking that the world, the universe, the entrepreneurship gods owe you business. They don't. It's yours for the taking. Figure out how to go out there and get what's yours, okay? In the realest sense.
Now, this is a sensitive topic, so I want to take some time to unpack this. First, I will say that his point where you focus is important, right? Where you focus, that's a very important point. And that not being a victim is extremely important. And the reason why that's important, to unpack that a bit, is subconsciously we create limits for ourselves when we put ourselves in a victim state. When we put ourselves in a victim state and say, hey, people are doing this wrong thing to us, regardless of whether it's true or not, it puts up limits on what we believe we have control over. And when we don't believe we have control, think of it. If you don't believe you have control over something, are you going to continue working to change that thing? Are you going to take quote unquote leaps of faith? Or are you going to feel like, hey, what's the point? What's the point? And that's something that is an issue, right? If you do that, that's not going to help. So I think it's more beneficial to focus on what we can control, right? And many other groups have gone through racism, sexism, etc. as well. So there are plenty of entrepreneurs who face this, Black and not Black, and with limited access to resources, but found a way to succeed. So I think one of the things this person is saying, and one things that can be helpful, is what can you control? What can people control in their lives, and focus on this rather than things they can't control, which are ways other people feel about them. So focusing on that is important. I'm going to dive into this. If you give me some time to really unpack all of this, I'm going to dive into this a bit more towards the end. I wanted to touch on the other part, which is, while saying this, it does not mean there are not biases and people who don't want to give opportunities to Black entrepreneurs. So some of this can be due to racism. Other things can be due to tribalism. Some might be due to ignorance or some negative experiences. Focusing on this gives us a lower chance to change things, right? Because you're trying to change somebody else rather than focusing on things we can control. What we control? We control our effort, we can control our resilience, our creativity, our collaboration, etc. Those things we can control. There's an African proverb, and it says the best way to eat an elephant in your path is to cut him into little pieces. So with that is, we can't just talk racism out. We have to cut it into little pieces. So I think us Black entrepreneurs have a unique ability to cut a good chunk of the elephant. And I think we can cut a good chunk of the elephant by becoming wealthy, wise, and influential. So with wealth comes resources and networks, right? And that can help us pave the way to, okay, let's get a chainsaw so we can cut off a leg faster, right? These things can make it easier to cut off a significant portion of the elephant. Now, wisdom comes the ability to diagnose a problem and create solutions that work, which is going to be instrumental in solving this down the road. And finally, influence also creates the ability for us to gather more people. Because if you're one person chopping at the elephant, it's going to take a long time if you even get to it before the elephant turns on you and kills you, right? Versus if you can influence enough people, especially wise people, especially dedicated people, you can really take down this elephant that seemed unmovable when it was just one person on the road. And that's something to do. This is something I think, let us know in the comments you agree, disagree. Thanks for taking the time to let me unpack it. I appreciate that. Please take a step to become a better business owner, leader, or person so you can do your part to cut the elephant. Let's watch the next video.
Out of Houston, Texas to be able to afford a Ferrari.
I'm an entrepreneur.
And how long have you been a business owner for?
21 years.
And what type of business do you run?
I own a labor force management company.
How important was it for you learning how to master delegation?
Let's put it this way. How important is it? My company will do $300 million this year in revenue, right? If I were still doing it all myself, we might do 3.
And have you ever been broke before?
I think every entrepreneur has been broke before, 100%. There was a point in time, I'll never forget this. I'd actually made about $3 million that year. I think I was 28 years old. Every dollar that I made had to stay in the company, but yet I had to pay income taxes on that money. So I owed like $950,000 in income taxes on that money. And I had like $10,000 in the bank. You can make a lot of money as an entrepreneur on paper and be broke financially, personally, because every dollar that you're making, if you're doing the right thing, has got to stay in that company to be able to grow it. It takes money to make money, like I said.
How did you get the money to start your business? Like, did you have a lot of money when you started?
No, we had no money. So you have to beg, borrow, and steal when you're starting it out. We had to take out high interest loans. I call it loan shark money back then. But I'm actually really glad I did it that way. I started out that way and I had to pay those absurd interest rates because it forced me to have the discipline to not take the money out of the business. Now you can go to a bank, get a traditional line of credit at 6 or 8%, whatever's going on. And now you go from 21% interest on your capital needs to 6 or 8. You've probably got an extra $20,000, $25,000 a month right back to your bottom line.
You know they don't teach that in school, right?
No, they don't teach any of this in school. That's the problem.
Thank you so much for your
My
time.
pleasure, man.
So it is true about being rich on paper and cash poor. So that can happen while you're running a bad business, a good business, a great business. The only thing I would say is try not to take out loans to start a business. There are too many unknowns when starting a business, and from product market fit, what assets have the best ROI for you, to when you get your cash back. When you take on loans, it's adding too much pressure when you're already in a pressure cooker. And it may seem like a good way to start, but I believe the vast majority of people go this way and up in a really bad situation with almost no way out. Now, even when you succeed, then you have to decide whether to pay yourself or choose to put the money back in the business to make it scale faster. This is what I do. I use almost all my profits to put back in my businesses. However, that is risky. There is some risk to that, because nothing is promised. Businesses can go under, markets can change. We all went through COVID and we saw how that completely changed the ecosystem for some time. I'm not going to say that you should put all your profits back into your business, 50% or 75% or 25%. You have to make that decision for yourself. However, if you do see things going well, I would say reinvesting your profits back into your business can add jet fuel to your business and make it more stable, not just more profitable. Actually can add stability too, because you can prime and reinvest our revenue growth. You can also prime and reinvest for revenue stability as well. Not many people talk about this, but you can kind of show up your customer base as well with that. Let's go to the next video.
Get ready to fail multiple times, because that's what's going to happen. And if you can't handle that, don't try. Only a third of people can actually make it through entrepreneurship, because it's incredibly hard. It's not get rich overnight. It's not a Bitcoin deal and all that stuff. The fact is, growing a business is almost impossible. It's going to take years. You're going to have to make mistakes. You're going to have to pivot. And you have this horrible decision about the balance of time in your life. It's best to be an entrepreneur in your 20s. It's very hard to do it later on when you're free to actually spend 25 hours a day working.
This is something so true. The vast majority of businesses take years, if not decades, to become really successful, right? Yes, there are people who have amazing stories going 0 to 1 million within a year or within a few months. However, these things are very rare. And it does not mean you failed or that you're not a good entrepreneur or a good business owner if you're not this get rich quick type of person. That's very rare. And it's usually the ones that do that well don't succeed in the long term. I'll get into that maybe a little bit later, but let me tell you about Walmart. So Walmart was actually founded and started its first store in 1962. At the same time, did you know that other competitors, Kmart, Target, Walmart, and Zale, was founded in the same year? So they all started in 1962. But by 1970, Walmart had 32 stores, but they were primarily in rural areas. Target had 24 stores in 1970, and Kmart had 252 stores by 1970. So think about this. Walmart out there with 32 stores, primarily in rural locations. Target has 24 stores, and Kmart has 250 stores. Now we're in 2024, so you know that Walmart by far is the biggest of the three, right? So it has a market cap today of $547 billion. About Target is the closest to that with $66 billion, so a fraction, right? And Woco is out of business. We also know Kmart's out of business as well. So just because you're not the first at some milestone, or you're not way ahead of the field, 8 years later or 2 years later in our time where everybody thinks everything has to happen 1, 2, 3 years, right? Think about this, 8 years later and it was that far behind, doesn't mean you can't grow into a big success. Run your own race. Last story I'll share. So Woco, the one with 250 stores, closed down its US operations in the 80s, right? In the 80s. And Walmart bought most of its Canadian operations in the 90s. So there's another lesson in this, right? Focus on what you're doing and what you're doing well, because you never know. You continue doing it well, you might be able to buy your competitor that was so far ahead of you, or the assets of that competitor. So once again, run your own race. Thank you for tuning in to Business and Life Advice with Ataande Advisors. Please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment to share what you found most insightful. I will try to respond to as many comments as possible. Also, email us at podcast@ataandeadvisors.com to submit your questions. I look forward to answering them and having some of your questions on the podcast. Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen. Be sure to tune in next week as well when we have another episode.